What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, October 16th, 2018. Sure happy it's, we're getting into the week here. We've got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. A lot of craziness going on here. At least the stock markets are having a better day than they've had before. So it looks like the plunge protection team got their act together. We're coming up on the midterm elections. The polls are tightening, and there is less and less talk about a blue wave. It's going to be a tight race. Of course, again, the polls are not going to be accurate because they're leaving out two factors. One is, of course, vote fraud, and the people who commit vote fraud or election fraud never respond to polls. And then you have how many illegal immigrants are voting because they're not being counted by the pollsters either. So we'll see what's going to happen. But and energized than it has been at any point since November of 2016. They're ready to get out there. They're definitely ready to get on out there here. And this obviously is very concerning to the Democratic establishment. It's concerning to Hillary Clinton. She apparently does want to run again in 2020, and the last thing she needs is for these investigations into her email, into whatever, to keep going. She's already been forced to surrender her security clearance. I don't for a minute believe the story that she requested that she and her aides have their security clearances removed. Basically, if you don't want a security clearance anymore, you just turn it in. I think she was ordered to surrender these security clearances and her aides. Now, disapproval of Congress right now is at 73%. I would like to see a lot of the incumbents replaced. But obviously, this midterm election is all about keeping GOP control of the Congress, not because I think the GOP is doing a good job, but because if the Democrat seize control of the House, they're going to shut down the investigations, and we'll be right back at square one with all of this corruption. So, now, let's talk about Elizabeth Warren, because this has blown up in her face. And again, yesterday when the story first broke, I said, 1,024th, well, let's just round it up, 1/1000th. And she went with that? I can't understand that. And I know she was between a rock and a hard place. She'd made a big deal during her whole career about how her mother was Cherokee and she had to deal with the racism, and she exploited being part Cherokee to get advantages, getting into Harvard. And was shameless, there's no question about it. And she got called on it. And so she gets, a proper DNA test. I'm not talking about one of those home kits. Those things are very inaccurate and very useless. She had a DNA expert run the test. They couldn't even find Cherokee DNA to reference it against, or any Native American DNA. So they used DNA samples from Mexico, Colombia, and Peru, and got a 1/1000th match and said, there it is, there's the deal. And the media went with it. The media went with it, saying, well, Donald Trump owes her an apology. He owes her $1 million, to her favorite charity. Well, actually, if Elizabeth Warren is only 1/1000th Native American, and they're not even saying that's an absolute, it's likely, it's a strong possibility she's 1/1000th Native American, then Donald Trump only owes $1,000 to the charity. The math is pretty solid on there. The Cherokee Nation is absolutely furious. And I read the statement that came out from their Secretary of State, Chuck Hoskin Jr., just absolutely trashing her and saying it was wholly inappropriate. DNA tests cannot identify tribal membership. And just, absolutely excoriated him and her. Now, this test was done by Stanford University professor Carlos Bustamante and said that somewhere Elizabeth Warren has a Native American ancestor, or Peruvian or Colombian or Mexican, going back somewhere between 6 and 10 generations ago. Now, that's not enough to claim tribal membership. Membership in a Native American tribe isn't based on DNA. It's based on hard documentation that, yes, you are, in fact, you have this heritage behind you. And I know a little bit about this because when Claire and I lived in Washington State, we hung out with the Snoqualmie tribe. They were going through the process of being legally recognized as a distinct Native American people and finally succeeded. And they take their genealogy very, very seriously. So we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And the reality is that the amount of Native American / Mexican / Peruvian / Colombian in Elizabeth Warren is actually less than the average white American citizen. I mean, that's how embarrassing this is. And she's caught. She's caught red-handed. And she has been exploiting this claim to be part Native American her entire political life. Apparently, there was a cookbook a while back that was titled Pow Wow Chow, which would be politically incorrect today. And it was a cookbook supposedly of Native American recipes to which Elizabeth Warren contributed a few, which turned out to be plagiarized. And again, at one point she claimed that her mother was Cherokee. She's just exploited this shamelessly. And in the process, she's basically demolished the whole affirmative action system because she got all the advantages of affirmative action without actually being a minority. She completely deceived them, completely fooled them. And that's very timely right now because affirmative action has come under attack, especially on college campuses. In fact, Fox News was just showing a protest at Harvard University where students are complaining about how admissions are being biased by their ethnicity. And that's the exact opposite of equality here. I mean, education should be about merit. And merit has really gone away in this politically correct age. You've got to be the right ethnic group, and you've got to, have the right political point of view, and you've got to pledge support to Israel and all the rest of it. And actual academic achievement has somehow been lost in all the noise here. And we need to get that back. Education should be about education, not indoctrination. Anyway, Tucker Carlson came on out and said Elizabeth Warren appointed herself the head of the #MeSue movement. And again, we're talking about a real serious DNA test that was done, laboratory quality. And again, we want to sound another warning. There's a group of scientists are saying these home ancestry DNA tests have little scientific backing, and they're so often unreliable and inaccurate, they mount to genetic astrology. And in point of fact, I got an email from somebody who is a documented Native American, and their DNA test came back saying that they were European Jew. That's how off the rack it was. All righty, we're going to take a phone call. Keith in Montana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, I didn't want to get out of order here on your show here, but, I've been watching all this stuff about this journalist that was basically assassinated and the room being painted over and like that, but I thought it was interesting that all this hype about that, when we look at all the reporters in Ukraine have been shot, the journalist over in Gaza being shot, and there's no mention of this. It's only when someone that is tied, and I think I believe I sent you the article there where it showed that he was one of the foremost in the Osama bin Laden events in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see the photos of him where he was carrying, I think it was an RPG and everything like that, But, everything is a constant distraction from the domestic problems we're having, just like you mentioned. Years ago, I took a friend of mine up there that tried to get his post and poll permit, and he was only 11/32 tribal member. And he fought like hell to get that just so he could go out get these posts, But I was surprised at the time there when they just turned to me and they said, "Do you want a permit?" And I says, "Not unless you're going to make me a member of the tribe." And he says, "You're not Indian?" And I said, "No." They said, "Well, you look more Indian than he does." He says, "I'm sorry about that." But I noticed everything what's in the news right now is a constant distraction, just like this constant hype of sexual misconducts, all this. Politicians, as you just mentioned there, with a congressional approval rate, these guys have been opting to screw Americans for decades here. They're the ones that allowed, through Congress, to allow these big corporations to offshore their jobs, to get that slave cheap labor, and destroy thousands of American jobs. And now we have Ford with a $1 billion loss, Verizon laying off 40,000, Sears in bankruptcy. This is all a distraction, whatever you're hearing in the news, from what's actually really going on in this country.
And around the world. I mean, we're still not seeing corporate media reporting on what's going on in Syria, let alone Yemen, and no mention of the fact that the U.S. may be pulling out of Afghanistan.
Yeah, well, that goes along with, what's his name, Eric Prince is there, Blackwater. First it was denied, and then suddenly the U.S. is going to pull out. So, like John Pilger says, never believe anything until it's officially denied, But anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there because these news stories are just every time you hear these thousands of people losing their jobs, it's a potential apartment lost, a home foreclosed on, a car repossessed, a family split up, divorced, whatever like that. This is what's really going on and what matters in this country.
I agree. And
anyway, my best to you and Claire, okay?
I'm sorry?
My best to you and Claire. I'll listen offline there. I'll get off your phone, though, okay?
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. I mean, corporate media basically feeds you what the powers that be want you to be thinking about. It's not just feeding you lies, it's directing your attention. Look over here, don't look over there. A lot of misdirection in corporate media. They're really not covering what's going on in the war zones. They're definitely not covering the war crimes being committed by the United States and its allies. It's basically all, product placement and pushing the liberal agenda for the midterm elections. And they've been doing it for so long. That's why the independent media has become so popular. And now, of course, we're under attack by the big corporate social media platforms who are pulling the plug, so that users who use those corporate media platforms are now getting only one side of the story, the liberal side. And they're not being allowed to see the conservative counter arguments. They're just getting a steady diet of, transsexualism, be tolerant, it's okay for men to use the ladies' room, and this other nonsense. And so with reference to InfoWars, their slogan is absolutely right. There's a war on for your mind right now. And unfortunately, at the moment, we're losing, because the big money is out there tied up with the liberal agenda. And that's kind of a surprise, because when I was a kid, it was always Republicans who were viewed as having the majority of the money out there. Okay, getting on back to our domestic political news. Remember Stormy Daniels, the porn star, who allegedly had an affair with him, was paid some hush money, then threatened to go public, actually did go public as part of this attempt to damage Donald Trump. Donald Trump responded to her online, and she sued for defamation, saying that Trump was implying that she was a liar. So the judge in the case has now dismissed the lawsuit, saying that Trump has a right to defend himself, and that his message basically is in fact protected by the First Amendment. So that's still going on there. And oh, by the way, the judge also ordered Stormy Daniels to pay all of Trump's legal fees. And that is going to sting. They haven't actually announced the amount yet, but we know what lawyers cost here. One of the issues going into the midterm elections is that both parties seem very pro-war. And if you remember back at the 2016 Democratic National Convention, everybody was chanting, "No more war, no more war, no more war," which was a good thing, I think. But going into this election, there are very few Democrats that are running on an anti-war platform. And the voters are tired of the war. So it's the Democrats want to take control of the House of Representatives, but they're not giving the voters a choice. They're not giving them a point of difference. It's like, if we vote the Democrats in, we're going to get the same thing we've been getting already. Out of control military spending and blood on our collective hands here. Now, up in Vermont, there is a mother who's running as a Republican for the state's House of Representatives, and she's claiming she received a left-wing death and rape threat in a pro-socialism letter mailed to her home. She posted it on Facebook. I got to tell you, I'm not sure I trust this one. We live in an age of hoaxes, hoax hate crimes to get attention. And this lady did. She got all over the TV up there in Vermont. So, all right. There's been, obviously, we're starting all the ads for the midterm elections, and some of them are coming out as real zingers here. Apparently, New Jersey Republican Senate candidate Bob Huggin has come out with a commercial ripping apart Senator Menendez. And basically, the ad was released after Menendez attacked Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh over the uncorroborated allegations made against him. And then this ad asked Menendez, "What about the underage girls who accused you?" Now, this goes back to 2012 when these allegations were made and were associated with the Democratic senator's corruption trial, which ended with a deadlocked jury, and basically involved sex with underage prostitutes Menendez had during trips to the Dominican Republic. All right, there's another ad. This one's actually very good. This is an ad from the Republican National Convention. And it's basically saying the Democrats' unhinged mob. And it's just very good editing where it's taking all of these Democrats who are saying, get on out there, get in their faces. If they go low, we kick them. And then they intercut it with like that guy who kicked the pro-life woman in the face, and Maxine Waters is in there, and it really does make the point that the Democrats have become this unhinged, out-of-control mob. And I think people looking at this ad are going to be saying, we can't have this in the Congress. It's going to be a disaster. So we're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And once again, we are standing here hat in hand, asking for help that Republic Broadcasting may stand up to all of this very obvious censorship going on. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can call in with a credit card or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. And of course, if you want to donate to whatreallyhappened.com, there's a little widget over in the right margin on my page. Getting on back to the upcoming midterm elections, the two largest donors in the lead up are both Israel advocates. The biggest one, of course, is Sheldon Adelson, who once said he'd wished he'd served in the Israeli military instead of the American one, and he's donating tens of millions of dollars to Republicans, and he is expected to be the top donor in this election cycle. Now, the Democrats are out there, sounding the panic warning, the blue wave is in danger, and they're trying to grab as much money as they can as well. Over at Project Veritas, they just released their third undercover video from the campaigns during this 2018 election season. And this one was aimed at incumbent Senator Claire McCaskill and individuals working on her campaign. One of the Project Veritas people basically went on in pretending to be a campaign volunteer and just got people to talk, which they were willing to do. And basically what they revealed is that Claire McCaskill is hiding her real agenda from the voters. She's trying to lure the moderate voters and not lose the hard left voters, but she's trying to be a moderate. But her real agenda is that, yes, she wants to ban all semi-automatic guns and various other extreme left points of view. So good for Project Veritas because they caught this lady basically lying to the voters. And the voters need to understand they are being lied to before they make that little mark on the ballot here. And we are still hearing from the Democrats that if they seize the House of Representatives, they're going to push for impeachment. And the corporate media is already trying to push this because apparently back in August, a Washington Post and ABC poll claimed to have found nearly 50% of Americans support immediate impeachment proceedings against the president. And I'm not sure I trust that because it is the Washington Post. And we know how polls can be manipulated. But here is the absolute reality. This would be a repeat of what happened to Bill Clinton. If the Democrats take the House of Representatives, the real damage is going to be shutting down the investigations. That's going to be the real damage. The impeachment is just decoration. They can gin up some kind of an excuse to impeach him, but they're going to have an actual cause. You can't impeach a judge or a president just because you don't like him. It doesn't work that way. So they can impeach him, but it takes a 2/3 vote of the Senate to remove from office. So Trump is going to stay in the White House. I'm sure in 2020, the Democrats are going to be campaigning on the fact that Trump got impeached during his first term in office. But they can't get him out of office with impeachment. It's not going to happen. There's no way the Democrats are going to get 2/3 of the Senate here. Hillary Clinton, again, she is showing indications that she wants to run again in 2020. And apparently her advisors are telling her that she could actually win the nomination if Joe Biden doesn't run. Now, Joe Biden's been talking about running as well, and Joe Biden may look at what's happened to a lot of other people who get in Hillary Clinton's way, and he may take a pass on challenging President Trump. But apparently, on yesterday's Hardball on MSNBC, Steve McMahon, who's a top strategist, said that some people close to the Clintons and close to Hillary Clinton who look at the field and think if Joe Biden doesn't run, it's a weak field and someone like Hillary Clinton could get back in. And unfortunately, he is right. Absent Joe Biden, the Democrats really don't have anybody else. I'd like to see Tulsi Gabbard get it. but she's too young, and I think from the point of view of national exposure, she would be seen as inexperienced for the job. But I like her. And I'm going to be very honest. If Hillary runs in 2020, I'm going to go back to supporting Donald Trump, as big a disappointment as he's been. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to take some phone calls, starting with Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I hope, Tulsi Gabbard might be inexperienced, but Mike, like, I wish Trump would stop coming out with these things like Horsehead and stuff against Stormy, because it's just, do you see Putin doing any of this? You know what I mean? It's just so childish.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's just, it disgraces this country in a way. We look unhinged, you know? Unhinged, and just, it's unbelievable. I wish he just not. At first, it was kind of funny he was doing this, you know, but it's got to stop, because it's just degrading, like the whole country now, just coming out, you know, and then they use it.
I agree with you.
You know?
I agree with you. I mean, I'm in favor of Donald Trump communicating directly with the American people over social media, but he shouldn't be swinging at those mud balls, because it does make him look less presidential, to use the term. And what Americans look for in a leader is somebody who looks and acts like a leader. And Trump is still acting like a reality TV star.
Yeah, I mean, you see Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin come out
Yes.
saying stupid stuff like that? No, you don't.
Nope.
You know what? And Mike, I got to switch gears to Saudi Arabia now. Like, did you hear what Lindsey Graham said about Bin Salman needs to go? And then Mitch McConnell said, like, if they might put sanctions. I doubt it, but do you realize in that part of the world that is an insult to them, like a slap in the face? You know, like what Lindsey Graham says.
Yes.
Because, like, it's a different culture, just like the Chinese with the trade war and all that.
Yes.
It's a different culture. So that was like a disgrace to the Saudi royal family. You know.
Yep.
So, if he goes, you know what's going to go? The petrodollar. That's going to go.
Very well. You know, Saudi Arabia could simply drop the deal, and that would be a major, major blow.
And the Chinese will be right there, just like when France pulled out of Iran, remember? And then
Yep.
who's going in there to do their oil? China, right?
Yep.
At that one, the large oil. And what's going on now, Mike? Did you see the Economist magazine, like the new issue? I mean, are we in the shift? Like, are we in that? You have that feeling? Are we in that global shift going on now?
Yep.
Like, of course, it just looks like it, doesn't it? Like, with all this stuff going on now with the Saudis, you know, interrogation gone wrong, if you believe. I mean, yeah, they could have knocked the guy off if they wanted on the street. But yeah, I mean, interrogate. But you know what our mothers used to tell us and our fathers? They used to say, the people you hang around with represent what you are.
Yes.
So this is who they are. This is who the Israelis are.
Yep.
You know, America. You know, this is who our government's been hanging out with. These are the kind of, you know.
And they've picked up some really bad habits.
Yes, they did, Mike. And like I said, I just have this feeling there is a shift going on, and it might not be moving fast, but it is happening. Because now, did you see Russia said that they're going to they're always talking about, and it was been moving away from the U.S. The dollar, and then China just dumped more treasuries. Did you see that? Like 500 billion or 500 million. So I mean, I think it's all coming unraveled. I mean, if we lose Saudi Arabia, and then did you see there's talk about putting a Russian base in Saudi Arabia? Did you hear anything about that?
Yeah, I heard about that. You know, I mean, the
Yeah,
world
I
is
mean,
definitely changing. The United States is an empire in decline. The big question is, will the United States go quietly into that darkness, or are they going to lash out at the rest of the world with a nuclear war as they thrash around in their death throes?
Yeah, because, you know, we're much more prosperous as America, not United States of Empire, because there is no America anymore as we known it, you know, throughout history. We're an empire, you know, and it's a neoliberal empire, you know, which makes it like, I mean, could be bad or worse, you know, than what was the Roman Empire? Was that more fascistic?
More what?
You know? Fascist?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, that's where that little symbol at the front of the House of Representatives comes from. The little bundled sticks with the axe handle, the axe head in it. That came from Rome.
I didn't know that. But, all right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I really had a bunch of stuff to say. I was going to mention the MiG-29. I watched that thing go through its paces. That was amazing. I know you could probably, you know, a lot about that. But I saw a comment online that just kind of summed it all up. And this guy said, I hate it when I wake up in the morning and realize Ron Paul's not president. So that kind of summed it all up for me.
Yeah. Well, it seems every election we have less and less choice, and that goes back to the article I mentioned a little while ago, where there are very few anti-war candidates out there. And that means the American people really don't have a choice. Even though the American people are tired of all these wars, we have hardly anybody we can vote for that would agree with us that it's time to stop these wars.
Yeah, you know, the Constitution, like, you know, I know you're familiar with it. There's, you know, Jefferson, whatever, warned about getting involved in foreign entanglements, and
that was
that's
Washington.
Our specialty.
Yeah,
oh,
that was Washington in his farewell address.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what we that's our specialty.
Yeah, it's
Michael,
what we do is overthrow other governments and take their wealth.
Hey, you know, you're right on. You're right on about this weather thing too. I was kind of iffy about the global warming thing. You know, years ago when I started listening to your channel, man, we're breaking some records with snowfall in Europe and United States. You're right on the money there too, bro.
No, there's a big record cold wave coming down over the Canadian border now, heading into the Colorado area. They're going to be dealing with some cold weather now.
Those people hate Al Gore. I'll let you go. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open again. And getting on back to our domestic political news here, Attorney General Jeff Sessions is basically hurling the defy at federal judges for what he has described as a dramatic uptick in outrageous decisions threatening to interfere with the separation of powers by exposing internal White House deliberations. Now, he basically made this point during a speech at the Heritage Foundation in Washington. And he said, once we go down this road in American government, there's no turning back. We intend to fight this, and we intend to win. Well, there's some place where Sessions has gotten off the track. There's a separation of powers between the three branches of the government, but there's no separation of oversight. That's why we have the three branches keeping an eye on each other. That's the whole point of it. And that means that the judiciary does have a right and a duty to look into the affairs of both the executive branch and the legislative branch, just as the legislative branch has a right and a duty to keep watch on the judiciary and the executive branch. That's the way it's supposed to work. So I wonder what Sessions is trying to cover up, but it's very obvious that he's a great believer in keeping secrets. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I have just a couple things I want to jump around on, but the first one, is you were absolutely right. You and Dustin talking about with the way we teach our kids, you become your friends. You are who your friends are.
Yep.
That's a very apt point. One of the things that could be a positive, I think that Saudi Arabia is so unstable, and there's almost no alternative. There's nobody out there except the real crazies like ISIS or Al Qaeda to pick it up if the House of Saud crashes. But they're really unstable, and one of the reasons this war with Iran, that of course Saudi Arabia and Israel have been greatly beating the drum for, is, and one of the reasons for the war in Yemen is because they wanted a pipeline that goes through, the ports in Yemen that will bypass the Strait of Hormuz that Iran could close down. And I believe the war with Iran, for a large part, has been put off until that alternative route is there. And if the House of Saud collapses, that will never happen, or at least it won't happen in the medium term anyways. And maybe that will put off the war against Iran. That's one point. What's your take on that?
I don't see the entire House of Saud collapsing. They've been around for a very, very long time. But I could easily see a palace coup against Mohammed bin Salman. He's not very popular, and of course he's got lots of other family members who'd like to sit in that center seat. I even understand that King Salman is very unhappy over some of the decisions that Mohammed bin Salman has come out with. So maybe the power went to his head, or maybe he just really wasn't paying attention when he was supposed to be learning about Saudi Arabia's place in the world. But I could see a palace coup. I'm not so sure the entire House of Saud is going to come crashing down, though.
Well, we will do our best to not allow that, but it's pretty unstable, and there's a lot of people who would like to destabilize it too. But the other point I want to make is there was one of those interviews on anti-war that Scott Horton does that talked with a guy who was off the World Socialist newspaper or something like that was chasing down the story and came down with between 30 and 60 people. I know you've talked about this before, of the Democratic candidates for upcoming congressional elections in a couple of weeks are ex-Intel, CIA, or
Yes.
military intelligence people.
Yeah, there's a lot of spooks in the Congress right now.
Yeah, and your point earlier about the what was designed to be, but of course is massively failing, the checks and balances, is if the billionaires and the intelligence agencies who have all the intercepts and the billionaires with all the money, they're the ones that really run the country.
Yes.
And now they're making no bones about it. They're putting their candidates in, and of course they put them in on the Democratic side because the CIA and the NSA and the FBI have all lined up against Trump. So, and the question is this purposeful? Is this an operation? Which I personally believe it is, or does this just inadvertently happen that so many of these candidates are running?
Well, the unknown part is how many of our politicians in past Congress have had links to the CIA. The CIA used to be very much out of the sight of the American public, but because of the independent media, these links are now being made visible. It may turn out that this has been the norm for quite a while, where a lot of these politicians are also connected to the CIA, and again, it's an indication that our government is really breaking into factions. You've got the billionaires on one side, you got the CIA on another side, you got the war party over here, you've got the money, the financial industry over here, and it does act very fractured, certainly in its foreign policy.
Yeah, it's. I don't know where we go from here, Mike, but it ain't good for you and me. Or the average American, that's for sure. We don't count in the equation at all. So, anyways, just wanted to hear your take on that, Mike. Thanks very much.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Peter. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are open again. Let's see. Apparently, back in 2017, the FBI actually investigated Andrew McCabe for alleged leaking about Trump and Michael Flynn. And of course, McCabe has since been fired concerning an alleged previously unreported media leak about Trump and Flynn. Now, this is according to documents just now being publicly posted by the FBI. And of course, you probably remember McCabe was fired in March just before his planned retirement by Attorney General Jeff Sessions, following a review by the Department of Justice internal watchdog that found McCabe repeatedly lied to investigators about his knowledge of leaks in the Wall Street Journal regarding the agency's probe into the Clinton Foundation. Apparently, McCabe authorized a series of leaks, according to the Department of Justice Inspector General, and he reportedly is under a grand jury investigation to determine if criminal wrongdoing took place. I would say that's entirely likely. Now, yesterday we ran this story where it's come on out that the FBI only recovered 5,000 of the 33,000 missing emails from Hillary Clinton's email server. We know the NSA has them. NSA offered them to James Comey. Comey turned them down. So Tom Fitton over at Judicial Watch is basically saying, this is huge. There are still 28,000 Clinton emails missing. And even worse, the State Department and Department of Justice are basically trying to stymie their efforts to find them. I think what's in those emails is a scandal that would certainly end Hillary Clinton's career and could be a threat to the entire federal government. I think Hillary, in the run-up to 2016, was replaying the 1996 Chinagate scandal. And nobody wants to look at that. It's a question that should have been asked and answered a long time ago. Nobody even wants to touch it. It's like the third rail of contemporary politics here. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break. When we come on back, we're going to be talking about the war zones. We're going to be talking about Khashoggi and Saudi Arabia and what's going on over there. So phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to take a phone call from Larry in Austin. Aloha, Larry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Lots on my mind. But anyway, I just wanted to mention a couple of things, respond to what you had just been talking about in the previous segment. Number one, the Hillary emails. I believe that's what's in those things, as you've said before, is involves so many people and so many, you used the word factions before.
Yes.
Possibly one faction or several, and I believe the emails will never come out because it will, and even if they do come out, they won't be publicized for people to actually know how serious and how deep all of it goes toward the corruption of our government. Mm-hmm. And the second thing I wanted to mention to you was, or to ask you actually. You used the word factions in the last segment.
Yes.
And it reminded me of some books I've read about the Civil War, and that the U.S. government had kind of broken down into sections. It had become sectional. And I wonder what you think about the correlation between factions and the sectional aspects of pre-Civil War.
Well, obviously, when government is badly factionalized, it can't function smoothly. And in Lincoln's time, of course, the issue was the strengthening of the central federal government, even though the Constitution had seriously restrained its authority. And Lincoln, of course, was a constitutionalist. He spent his administration obviously holding the country together from the southern slave states that wanted to secede. And really was about holding the country together. Lincoln seized on the slavery issue to motivate the Union to say, yes, we must go deal with this. But it was really all about holding control over the territories and about the money, because at that point in time, a great deal of tax revenue was coming in from those antebellum plantations. And if you look very carefully at the Constitution, at the amendments that were passed immediately after the Civil War, you will see in there the transition from our original constitutionally limited central government to this consolidated, powerful beyond reproach body that it has grown to be today. And there were a whole bunch of amendments that were passed saying the states could no longer question the federal government on borrowing, things like that. And it really did mark a major transition in the way this country was being run.
Yes, this is what the Reconstruction actually was. It wasn't rebuilding, it was reconstructing the entire Constitution and form of government.
Well, the Reconstruction was in the South. What was going on in Washington, D.C. was hidden from the American people, who probably would have started a new civil war if they had seen what Congress was up to. Anyway, listen, we got to take a break for station identification. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And getting on back to the war zones here, apparently this plan for a demilitarized zone around Idlib has reached its first deadline for the plan, and Turkish media has already claimed that all of the heavy weaponry has been withdrawn by the so-called opposition. However, there have been recent rocket and mortar strikes on government targets in northern Hama, which indicates that it's at least partly untrue. So it's not going as well as might be expected. Pardon me again. Apparently, back on October 13th, the U.S.-led coalition once again used white phosphorus munitions, and the attack resulted in civilian casualties. Now, last month, white phosphorus was also used by 2 U.S. Air Force F-15s in an attack on the town of Hajin in Deir ez-Zor. The Syrian government has repeatedly condemned the U.S.-led coalition. The U.S.-led coalition claims they need the white phosphorus to fight ISIS, and that justifies its use. Or alternatively, they're denying its white phosphorus. Now, white phosphorus does not fall under the category of chemical weapons that are banned by the Chemical Weapons Convention, but it is considered an incendiary weapon, and as such, it cannot be used against non-combatants. Protocol 3 of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons prohibits the use of said incendiary weapons against civilians, which is also forbidden by the Geneva Convention, or in civilian areas. Now, white phosphorus is nasty, nasty stuff. It ignites spontaneously on contact with air. It produces a dense white smoke, which is often used as a screen, which is considered its only legitimate use in war. If the stuff gets on you, I mean, the temperature reaches like 900 degrees centigrade. It's insanely hot. Water will not help. And if it gets on your torso, it's going to burn right through to your internal organs. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now from Fran in Washington State. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, nui nui, Michael. Excuse me. I have a frog in my throat. I was
spit it out.
Very pleased to read. Yeah, I was real pleased to read your excerpt on your webpage about Amendment 17, and I think repealing it would be an excellent idea. And I think we need to have more exposure, because I was not even aware that Amendment 17 essentially took our choices for our own senators out of our hands.
Well, that's not exactly what it did. Before the 17th Amendment, the people of the states elected their representatives to the House of Representatives, and the state legislators elected the senators. And that was to guarantee that the state governments had a say in the running of the country. And the 17th Amendment basically took that away. It turned the senators into a popularly elected office, which in effect hamstrung the state governments. They had less influence. And that was part of that consolidation of power into the central federal government.
Oh, so I get it. They put them into a position where they needed lots of money from lots of special interests to gain the seat.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the after effects. But the idea was to take the position of senator and make it a popularly elected office. And it was sold to the American people as, hey, we're letting you pick your senators now. But the real goal, again, was to reduce the ability of the state governments to influence affairs in Washington, D.C.
Well, that can't be a good idea.
Well, for Washington, D.C., it was considered a great idea. It certainly was not the way this country was originally set up.
Precisely. Anyway, just thought I'd bring it up to talk about again.
Yep.
And you have a great day.
All right. Thank you very much. And we're going to let you go, and the phone lines are open again here. Okay, we're getting on back to Syria, and a little bit of criticism coming from Russia today about a new BBC Two documentary, which is titled A Dangerous Dynasty, House of Assad. Ooh, bad Assad, evil Assad. And Russia today is pointing out that BBC is clearly not objective with this, that it is an attack on Assad, and doesn't mention the West's role in destabilizing Syria. So BBC is back to doing their propaganda stuff. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Apparently, accusations have surfaced that U.S. and French forces have begun excavating historical sites in the Manbij region in northeastern Aleppo to discover and steal the country's artifacts. This is coming from Syrian media. It was a report that came out yesterday in the Arabic language Al Watan Daily. And they quoted local sources in northeastern Aleppo as disclosing the French and U.S. forces and the Washington-backed militias have excavated a number of these historical sites. And apparently, along with the artifacts, they have found gold, apparently a large volume of it. Now, remember what happened when the U.S. went into Iraq and they put, all the security forces around the oil ministry, and that was being guarded, and the Baghdad Museum was left wide open, and it just got plundered. And now they're doing it again to Syria. They're plundering Syria's cultural treasures. So let's talk about Saudi Arabia and Jamal Khashoggi. Now, as of right now, the report that was teased by CNN's Jake Tapper, in which the Saudis were going to say it was an accident, a botched interrogation, has not yet appeared. And it looks to me like everybody's just waiting for the story to fade away for lack of any information at all. But some people are speculating that Saudi Arabia may throw their snatch squad under a bus. I don't think so. I think following the chest thumping about all of this, that everybody has decided to back off because there's serious economic and political issues that everybody wants to avoid disturbing. All right, we're going to take another phone call. James in Ohio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I ended up not going to to protest Trump here in my town because the fact is that everybody that saw me would go home and tell everybody that I was Antifa, and I really don't need that.
No, you don't.
Yeah, not here. I don't, especially. But I'm like the polar opposite of Antifa. But it points out a problem in most people's thinking, especially in the past 5 years. People have divided everything into black and white, and there's no third alternative. There's no shades of gray. What I think Sun Tzu said something about you should enjoy your enemy's successes. Now, you think about it, you've got the left and the right picking up protest signs that say, yay billionaires, yay government, because we're relying on them to solve all the problems. This is it's like a caricature of itself if you zoom out and kind of get that concept. I mean, we have the social media giants on one side, those billionaires, and then we have Donald Trump and Sheldon Adelson and et cetera on the other. And they're not going to solve all the problems. And as much as I hate to say it, and I know you don't like this either, I don't see any way to peacefully take power away from those that are in power. And I know, like you say, the American people are not prepared for it, but at some point we have to say, I think, that if it's a Pyrrhic victory, it's a Pyrrhic victory. At least we didn't go down on our knees.
Well, obviously, I disagree with you, and I still see the ultimate outcome of what's going on as a Soviet Union-style collapse. And we can see the signs of decline in the nation already. We're seeing it in the economic fragility. We're seeing it in the fact that, we're not winning all these wars against relatively weak countries. We're certainly not prepared to go to war against Russia and China. We've lost the ability to do a lot of things that we did just decades ago. And we've lost much of our manufacturing. We've made a huge strategic blunder with the GMO agriculture. This nation is in serious trouble. And I think one of the reasons you're seeing so many people out there in the streets ready to engage in violence is they may not understand exactly what's gone wrong with this country, but they understand something has gone wrong. And they're anxious about it. They're dealing with anxieties about it. It's not unlike, again, a small child reacting when their parents get into a fight in front of them, and all of a sudden your entire worldview is under threat.
You would see this in the early days of people making documentaries about political conspiracies on YouTube and all these forums, open political forums. You would see like a wave of inactivity now and again. And it was because I think people were just depressed because of all the bad news.
Yeah, it can be very depressing. This is a very depressing job to do here. In fact, I've had to ban Claire from posting because yesterday it started getting to her. And we all need to take vacations and get away from this, because after a while it's just so overwhelming, because every day it's the same bad news. It's just a different version of the same bad news. Everybody knows what's coming. Everybody's just getting all nervous about when is it going to be here? When does the economy actually have the big plunge? When does the big war really begin? And it's very stressful.
As if politics was our only problem. Global warming may not be a problem, but pretty much chemical pollution of every other kind is.
Yes. Global warming was a scam. Global warming was a get-rich-quick scheme, and the people who are in control of these governments, they may make a token gesture about really caring about the environment, but they don't. And you can tell. just from how bad the environmental destruction is.
Yeah, but everything else, the heavy metals, the antidepressants in the water, that's all valid. Nuclear waste. Back in maybe 10 years ago, Project Censored had a story that Denver planned on dumping nuclear waste in the sewer system. And there were companies that were mixing it in with fertilizer for crop fields.
Now that
I'm not sure what the rationale was for that.
I don't know either, but the problem is that when you have radioactive isotopes in farm soil, the plants will literally take it up into themselves. It's called bioaccumulation.
Right.
And planting greenery above the site of a nuclear accident is a standard way of trying to clean up the radioactivity. That's what made cigarettes so dangerous. It wasn't really the tobacco that was giving you cancer. It was the radioactive fertilizer. And
that
was a really stupid thing to do.
I saw a video representation of the highest exposure rates for radioactivity, and smokers are like many times that of astronauts, people who fly all the time, and nuclear workers and X-ray technicians. Smokers would like cap them all. So, but that's all I got for you. Thanks for your time, and everybody should donate to RBN.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the plug. Thank you for the call, and we're going to let you go, and the phone lines are open again. Okay. So a former ambassador from the United States to Saudi Arabia basically came on out dissing Trump for his wide-eyed acceptance of King Salman's denial. And he said, you can't trust this guy. I mean, after all, he told me 9/11 was an Israeli plot. I mean, so how silly can you get? Now, here is something that's kind of interesting here. As we talk about Trump backing off and saying it could be rogue killers, it could be this, it could be that, we don't really know. Look at the difference between the way this disappearance, we don't know for a fact he's dead. We haven't found the body. Supposedly it got cut up and dumped somewhere. But look at the difference between how this is being handled versus the Skripal case, where there was this rush to judgment against Russia. Oh, yeah, they did it. No question. We don't need any evidence. We don't need any facts. We know that Russia did it. Condemnation, condemnation, condemnation. And yet Riyadh gets the benefit of the doubt for most people. Now, a lot of this is tangled up, of course, with keeping oil prices down, keeping Saudi Arabia on our side, not letting them reconnect with Iran, which they threatened to do. But Lindsey Graham is out there on the warpath against Saudi Arabia. And he said that he would sanction the heck out of Saudi Arabia, and he had harsh words for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who is now the person alleged to have ordered the interrogation and killing of Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul. Now, Lindsey Graham described himself as Saudi Arabia's biggest defender in the Senate, but he's definitely turned on the U.S. ally. And he's saying that Crown Prince Mohammed is a toxic figure who has got to go. Now, that right there may be a motive for somebody to have arranged this killing, somebody other than the Saudi government. Because as I was mentioning to that previous caller, there's a lot of people who don't like Mohammed bin Salman. Remember, when he became the crown prince, the first thing he did was grab some of the wealthiest members of the family, lock them in a hotel, and say, you can't get out until you put some of your money back into the Saudi treasury. And that's not going to make anybody any friends at all. Pat Robertson has come on out regarding the Saudi killing of the journalist by saying, everybody ought to calm down. We have to focus on the important things, like those lucrative arms deals we have with Saudi Arabia. Let's keep a look on the big picture. Meanwhile, Saudi Prince Khalid bin Abdullah Al Saud has called for a new military campaign against Kuwait. And that, of course, has sparked a backlash, criticism, and calls that maybe Saudi Arabia has got to stop meddling in other nations' internal affairs, like they're currently doing in Yemen. And so Al Saud wrote this note on Twitter saying Kuwait needs a new Operation Decisive Storm to purge it from the dirt of the Muslim Brotherhood and the supporters of Hamas, like the Qatari ruling family. So it's all getting tangled up again in religion, holy war, jihad. Everybody's slitting each other's throats over whose imaginary playmate in the sky has the largest genitalia. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with a caller on the line after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And the phone lines are just loading up here. We're going to start with Andrea in Oklahoma. Aloha, Andrea. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, aloha, first of all. Last night I was listening and gave a donation of $150 and to RBN. And they were talking about, oh, you're more than welcome. You all do a fantastic job at sharing the real news. And it's frightening. And I think if we all got together, we could do something. But they were talking last night after you left and went on to do Jim Garrett's show, which I can never find it, so I can continue listening to you. What the point is, they were talking about this new 5G that's getting ready to be released. It's going to be released in Los Angeles, and what they're saying about it's going to be in a lot of different cities, Waco, Dallas, a lot of different cities. And what it is, because it's such a wide band, they're going to put these, I guess, like transformers, so it will penetrate your house. It's the technology is like those defensive trucks that they put out to disperse large groups of people. They like have you in a microwave. It's so intense. And right now, the 3G and 4G, depending on how you carry it on you or how close you hold it to your body, can give you cancer. And they showed Jim McCain as one of the ones that had a big cancer and had it removed from one side of his face where he held his phone. But it causes so much damage to people, especially children. They say older people too. But the 5G is going to be a cooker. It will penetrate and cook everything around it. It will totally change our
let me interrupt you here because all 5G is the next logical extension between 3G and 4G. And what I think is going on here is that the services that are currently supplying 4G and 3G are afraid of losing business with the 5G rollout. And I've been hearing all this fear-mongering that are making all these exaggerated claims like this 5G is going to be this incredibly dangerous system that we should all avoid. Let me share a little story from history. Thomas Edison, following his development of the electric light bulb, he got into a fight, a contest, if you will, with George Westinghouse over which electrical system was going to become the standard for the nation. And obviously there was a huge amount of money tied up with it. Now, Edison had done all of his work with direct current electricity, and he was pushing for that to be adopted as the national standard from which he would then make a lot of money. Now, George Westinghouse, who had worked with Nikola Tesla, had showed that alternating current could actually reach much further along transmission lines with much lower loss of energy, and he was pushing for that standard. And it was clearly a superior system to DC. So Edison, trying to scare Americans away from alternating current, literally went around the country electrocuting animals with alternating current. at one point an elephant. And believe it or not, that's the origin of the electric chair. Thomas Edison built a chair to execute a criminal with alternating current, which, because it doesn't pass directly through the body, it took the poor guy like a very long time to die. And it just disgusted everybody. And ultimately, of course, we're all running on alternating current. Now, as far as the 5G, 4G, 3G, Wi-Fi, I think attention ought to be paid to the sum total of electromagnetic radiation that we are immersed in as a culture. But I think this fear-mongering about 5G, it's just an electrocuted elephant.
Well, I wish you would research it just a little bit more, but I thank you for your time, and everybody needs to look at it really good, because 5G, they're using it as a weapon, and you know what it's like when you put anything in a microwave. It cooks it from the inside out. So
well,
thank you for your time.
You have to deal with the level of energy. Okay, obviously, you know, everyone's trying to equate this 5G with that, you know, microwave on a truck that's used for crowd control. The difference is the amount of energy. Now, 4G and 5G and 3G are very low power. And Bluetooth is even lower power than that. And if you're concerned about, you know, your cell phone being a transmitter, which it is, use a Bluetooth earpiece, and you're being exposed to much less electromagnetic radiation. But every time I've been sent any of this stuff about 5G, it's all unfounded hype and scare. It'll do this, it'll do that. Really? Do you have any documentation and proof? No, we just heard it here. I think it's fake news. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones now to David in Missouri. Aloha, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey,
David?
Mike. Are you talking to Dave?
Dave.
Hey, brother.
Hi, you're on the air.
I don't know how this happened, but I received a phone call from your station about 15 minutes ago, and I tried to answer. I kind of took that as maybe that I should call in. I've been low profile lately. Know that.
Yes.
And it's been for a reason. I am under so much just torment from the wall Martians, the liberal media. I know you're feeling this too. I know you're getting the same thing. And but I had to call in because, well, you called me first. But okay, let me go ahead and just lay this out. So, y'all, I love you. I mean, I've only done everything I could, as Mike is doing everything he can to preach the truth. Well, if you will not listen, folks, listen. If you won't listen, if you won't shop locally owned, if you won't buy American, if you won't support the future of your children, guess what? Your children have no future. And you did it. And you can't say I didn't know. You can't say that because you've been told so many times, so many ways. You've seen it with your own eyes. You've seen your downtowns dilapidate. You've seen hometown, Main Street, just absolutely erode to dereliction.
Okay, David.
And you can't.
Yeah, David.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we have had this conversation before, and we understand things are very bad in this country, and it is deteriorating, and people are upset about it. But there are all kinds of causes.
Somebody's got to do something. Somebody's got to do something, brother.
I'm trying to educate the public. I'm trying to educate the public, okay? That's the best that we can do. That's what we're in the business of doing.
And that's what I'm doing. That's what, hey, your station called me, right?
Well, not according to our control room technician. It may have been a spoofed robocall, which everybody is getting that.
Really? Is that what's going on?
Yeah,
Because,
we didn't call you.
I mean,
Okay.
oh,
So,
well, no, you did. Well, somebody did from Republic.
okay.
But regardless,
David, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much. And we're going to switch over to John in Tennessee. John, aloha. Welcome to the
Mike,
show.
how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How about you?
I'm doing good. I monitor Christian radio, and I want to alert the listeners the next phase for the Zionists here. There's a guy named Brandon House, Howse. He does a show called Worldview Weekend. He's out of Memphis. He does these conferences in the Ozarks every year. He gets all the Christians that come there. He's putting out a movie. It's called SabotageTheMovie.com.
Okay.
And I mean, everything out of Pamela Geller's mouth is absolute truth. These are Zionist Christians that believe in the rapture. They're trying to scare everybody that, the reason the borders are open is because they want the Muzzies to come in and kill all the Christians and Jews. But what he's doing now, and I just listened to his program today, what he's doing now is he's like, it's time for Christians to focus on the enemy behind the enemy. And he's going back to the Grand Mufti, meeting with Hitler, and he's selling people that Russia is the one behind ISIS and behind all the open borders and everything.
Well, that sounds it sounds like a great deal of nonsense to me. First of all, I know for a fact everything coming out of Pamela Geller's mouth is not the truth. It's propaganda.
Me too.
And this is just more gratuitous Russia bashing. So anyway, listen, I need to get back to reporting on the news, and thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and get back to the news. So thank you very much. Okay. Now, where were we? Okay, article coming out of Zero Hedge. How America can repair its damaged relationship with Russia. Well, not sanctioning them and trying to get them blamed for Skripal when there's no evidence to support it. And it wasn't all that long ago that the United States was all buddy-buddy with the Russian republics. They were in the same economic forums. They were doing a lot of business with each other in Europe, and it was looking really great. And then somebody somewhere said, we need a new enemy. We need a new enemy so we can stimulate the need for weapons sales, which is really what the Cold War was all about. Weapons and money. And so we've seen the demonization of Russia. Now they're starting the demonization of China. And they're trying to get a new Cold War going, but it could easily go hot. Look how close we got during the last Cold War with the Cuban Missile Crisis. That came within a hair's breadth of an actual nuclear exchange. The Russophobia is spreading all over Europe. Up in Denmark, they have a new set of laws suggested by the liberal government that's ruling Denmark, and the set of laws are going to be brought to Parliament, and they're designed to counter the influences of foreign intelligence services, and they're aimed at Russia, and these proposed laws would make it illegal, punishable by 12 years in prison, to share opinions, news articles, or anything that could influence public opinion in any way if it happens to coincide with the views shared by foreign intelligence services. Well, that rules out about 90% of the things coming through our desk. I mean, this is hysteria bordering on dictatorship. Apparently over in Ukraine, they were having some training exercises with the U.S. forces, and a Ukrainian Sukhoi 27 has crashed during these war games. Both pilots were killed. One of them was an American. No further details. Now, Egypt's President al-Sisi is getting ready to meet with Vladimir Putin, and the Minister of Electricity and Renewable Energy, Mohammed Shaker, and head of the Nuclear Power Plant Authority, Amjad al-Wakil, are holding meetings with officials of the Russian company Rosatom on the sidelines. Russia is going to build Egypt a nuclear power station, because that's one of the things Russia does in the international marketplace. They built the one that's in Iran. They're getting ready to build a second one. And now Egypt wants one as well. And I'm sure that Israel's going to be having a cow saying, they're going to build bombs. They're going to build bombs. Only we're allowed to have nuclear reactors here. Here's another little article. This is from strategicculture.org. The U.S. military presence in Africa, all over the continent, and still expanding. And we mentioned before, Bernie Sanders came on out and said that the U.S. has military forces stationed in 76 countries around the world. Actually, this article is saying 200,000 U.S. troops are stationed in 177 countries throughout the world. What Bernie Sanders said was we're conducting military operations in those 76 countries. These 177 countries are where we have our military bases. And there are several hundred of them, and Africa is no exemption. Now, back in August, Major General Roger Cloutier took command of U.S. Army Africa, or AFRICOM, promising to hit the ground running. Now, technically, the U.S. is not waging any wars in Africa, but it's got a significant presence on the continent. There are Navy SEALs, there are Green Berets, and all kinds of special operation forces are conducting nearly 100 missions across 20 African countries at any given time, waging these secret, limited-scale operations. According to the magazine Vice, U.S. troops are now conducting 3,500 exercise and military engagements throughout Africa per year, an average of 10 per day. That's a 19-fold increase since AFRICOM rolled out 10 years ago. Now, many activities are described as advise and assist. They're actually indistinguishable from actual combat by any reasonable definition. We saw the same thing in Vietnam. The first Americans to go to Vietnam, they were advisors. Advisors who were shooting at the people who were shooting at them. Africa is a rich storehouse of undeveloped natural resources. In fact, it's one of the last remaining places on Earth where natural resources are still close to the surface. The rest of the world has been pretty much mined and drilled out. So that's what's going on here. It's all about conquering the resources, not to use them, but to make sure they're sold only for the U.S. dollar. Now, here's a good one. This came out of mondoweiss.net. Apparently, the Israeli Arab Muslim TV host, this is coming out of Israel, Lucy Aharish, who's the first to host a Hebrew-speaking show, and Israeli Jewish actor Tzahi Haliva, known from Netflix, got married. And their ceremony is considered unofficial in Israel. At the beach at Hadera. That's because Israeli law does not permit interfaith marriage. In fact, Israeli politicians are condemning the marriage of these two celebrities as an effort to hurt our state. And so the only option they have left is to conduct an unofficial ceremony in Israel, but do the actual official marriage in another country, where this then gets retroactively recognized by the state. And Israel's not happy about that at all. We actually have a lot of that sort of thing happening here in Hawaii, but for more benign reasons. Japanese couples love to come out here and get married here and get photographed, but a marriage here in Hawaii is not considered legal in Japan. So when they go back to Japan, they have a second ceremony to make it formal. Okay, apparently, this is coming out of Middle East Monitor, a 20-year-old Israeli policewoman has been arrested and taken before Jerusalem Magistrates Court in a bail hearing. And apparently what she did is she shot an unarmed Palestinian in the back with a sponge-tipped bullet without any operational reason at all, leaving him seriously wounded. And the court's top judge, Elad Persky, said from what they can see, it looks like this policewoman just shot the Palestinian for the fun of it. And I'm glad they're going to try and hold this policewoman to account, because that is a stupid thing to do. It's a dangerous thing to do. We have problems with that sort of behavior here in our country as well. Now, getting on back to the fuss that's being made up over Khashoggi's disappearance, and again, we don't know for a fact that he's dead because his body hasn't been found. But they did make a big fuss about it. And so the Palestinian Journalist Syndicate has basically come on out and said, Israel is systematically targeting journalists. Nobody makes a fuss about them. And he's right, it's a double standard. And over at whatreallyhappened.com, I posted a link to one of the pages over at the If Americans Knew website, which lists journalists shot and killed by Israel. And the corporate media doesn't make a big fuss about it. It's no big deal here. And it does seem rather suspicious why such a fuss was made in this one case. Was it just because he worked for the Washington Post? Did somebody want to disrupt the Saudi Economic Summit, Davos in the desert? They succeeded in doing that. Is somebody setting the stage for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to be brought down with this political nightmare? Something's going on behind the scenes with this. There's more to this than just the abduction and interrogation and death. Something else. There's another agenda at work, I'm pretty sure. Apparently, there was a mass Palestinian protest along the beach of Gaza near the Israeli frontier. And protesters threw flaming tires over the fence, fishing boats hoisted Palestinian flags. Israeli forces responded with tear gas and live fire, wounding 32 Palestinians. And the protest was basically in response to this crippling blockade, because Israel just recently further restricted how far out the Gaza fishing boats can go. And if you know anything about fishing, especially commercial fishing, getting out into the deep water is where you find the decent catches. If you're forced to stay by the beach, you're not going to get all that much. So, now, back in 2015, Israel approved a law that stipulated a 20-year prison sentence for individuals caught throwing stones. And this law was targeting Palestinians involved in resistance activities, despite the discrepancies between armed Jewish Israeli settlers and Palestinians in terms of weapons available for them. But it turns out this may be the reason why Israel issued a gag order on that rock attack by Israeli settlers that killed that Palestinian woman. They don't want the settlers to be arrested. They don't want them to be named in the newspaper. They don't even want to admit they're in violation of that law. The law is enforced only when the offender is a Palestinian. And it comes down to the fact the Israeli military is killing kids in the Gaza Strip on a regular basis. And you wouldn't know it unless you watch BBC or Al Jazeera or read Middle East Monitor or whatreallyhappened.com. The American corporate media just doesn't care, or if any of them do care, they're told, no, you will not cover this. And if you look at the volume of important stories that are not being covered by the corporate media, you will realize that if you depend on corporate media, you are effectively deaf, dumb, and blind. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Secretary of Defense Mattis is now out there bashing China, calling them predatory for their actions in the South China Sea. How dare they go down to the South China Sea? How dare China go to the South China Sea? How dare they build up those islands? And he's also accusing China of forcing smaller countries to run up significant debts. this is more propaganda. This is more China bashing. Where does Mattis think we're going to go with this? That Chinese envoy the other day said it exactly right. You're not seeing Chinese ships cruising along the coast of California or going through the Gulf of Mexico. You know who the aggressor is here. And forcing countries to run up significant debts, that's a tactic the United States itself has used, especially in South America, going back decades, and using that debt to control them. Over in Korea, the news continues to be positive. The Koreas have agreed to begin reconnecting the rail and road links across the DMZ. And the United States, of course, is throwing a tantrum about this, that if North and South Korea reunite, it's going to undermine the efforts to press North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons. But they're moving forward. I mean, for all practical purposes, the two Koreas have ended the Korean War. The only holdout is the United States, which is out there saying, this is our war. It's not over till we say it's over. You know, we paid for it. And so everybody is observing the very obvious progress toward reunification between Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un. And they're still trying to keep the focus on Kim Jong-un's nukes. But if the Koreas reunify, the nukes become irrelevant. The United States is not going to be able to justify reinvading the entirety of Korea all over again. And so the reason for Korea to have the nukes declines. Now, they may decide to hang on to them anyway, because a weapon of deterrence is a weapon of deterrence. And Korea has as much right to weapons of deterrence as anybody else. And it's hypocritical for the United States to run around the world saying, well, that country shouldn't have nuclear weapons. You know, they're going to use them. That country shouldn't have nuclear weapons. They're going to use them. When the only country to ever actually use nuclear weapons on the civilians of another country is the United States. So if you're worried about nuclear terror coming down from the skies, let's start with the nation that actually has done it before we start hurling accusations all over the place. The United States used the nuclear weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to prove that we had these horrible weapons and the political will to use them. But the reason for having nuclear weapons today is to discourage invasion. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Finishing up here on Korea, apparently Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Igor Morgulov will be holding a meeting with U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, in Moscow. Actually, it's happening right now today. And they're going to be consulting about the situation on the Korean Peninsula. And I'm going to take a guess that Russia is saying, let them reunify. And so the U.S. is going to be coming from a very, very weak position on that. So we'll see what happens. All right, let's talk about the economic news here. The Dow had a good day today. The plunge protection team definitely got back in there. But overall, global markets are continuing to fall. Bloomberg is warning the next financial crisis is staring us in the face. So you better get ready for it. Now, the G20 is going to be meeting in Buenos Aires on November 30th, and it's going to be rough. Starting with the U.S.-China trade war. Washington won't even talk trade with China at the G20 unless China comes up with a detailed list of potential concessions. In other words, you give us what we want first, and then we'll talk. The word from the Chinese is not entirely bleak. Some kind of an agreement could be made on about a third of the U.S. demands. Debate on another third could ensue. The last third is absolutely off limits due to Chinese national security imperatives, such as refusing to allow the opening of the domestic cloud computing market to foreign competition, which, yeah, would bring with it espionage and all kinds of other problems here. So, after a relatively tranquil third quarter, the markets are back to high volatility. And, of course, there are some traders who like that. They get off on the adrenaline. One area of our economy that is doing good, of course, is the military-industrial complex, and U.S. weapons sales have surged by 1/3 since Donald Trump took office. Because we're out there just kicking off all these wars and tensions, and everybody says, oh, we got to buy up weapons, got to have more weapons. That's what the whole first Cold War was about, keeping everybody afraid, keeping countries at each other's throats, and then selling them the weapons. Anyway. Apparently, there is renewed interest in gold as a safe haven following the rough ride on the stock market that we had the last couple of days. Last couple of trading sessions. Poland has raised their gold holdings to a record high in September, according to the IMF. And Hungary's central bank has announced they've boosted their gold reserves tenfold to try and improve the security of the nation's wealth and reduce risks. So everybody's golding up, and you should too. Meanwhile, Russia is continuing to work on their plan to rid their economy of the U.S. dollar. And they've got this de-dollarization plan, was announced earlier this month. The key objective of the program is to make it more profitable for key Russian exporters to use rubles instead of dollars. And they're going to get perks like tax credits, quicker value-added tax returns, and other stimulus to ditch the greenback. So it really is happening. It really is happening. Meanwhile, today, not waiting for November 4th, the U.S. has issued new sanctions targeting 20 Iranian entities, including 4 banks. And apparently this so-called network is known as Banyad Taban Basij, which is translated as the Basij Cooperative Foundation, and it's comprised of these 20 corporations and financial institutions. And the goal of all of these sanctions is to disconnect the Middle East state from international financial channels, which the U.S. is not getting a lot of support on that. Now, last week, we reported on this story where there's this new bill in Congress that literally wants to decide Europe's energy future for Europe. And it was arrogant as all get out. And the gist of the bill was to force Europe to continue to buy U.S. oil and gas and to not do business with Russia. And don't forget, a while ago, we had that Secretary of the Interior saying literally the U.S. could declare a naval blockade around Russian ports to prevent their tankers from sailing. It's all about the money and everything. Well, a German diplomat, Foreign Ministry State Secretary Andreas Michaelius, is basically told the United States to mind its own business, and that the U.S. shouldn't interfere in European energy policy, and that Russia will remain a key energy supplier for Europe. So yeah, the rest of the world is getting really sick and tired of all this game playing by the U.S. We're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And North Korean economic experts are saying that despite all the sanctions they've been hit with, their economy is actually pretty much steady. In fact, their GDP grew by 3.7% during 2017. And that was a year during which North Korea was banned from selling its most crucial export goods. So all these sanctions, and tariffs are doing are making countries more self-reliant, and that is directly opposite of what the New World Order globalist movement wants. They want this country doing electronics, dependent on this country making clothes, dependent on that country for oil, dependent on this country for corn. Make everybody dependent on each other, because dependency means slavery. And what are we seeing? We're seeing all these countries breaking away, pulling back, and becoming more self-reliant. One of the biggest mistakes the United States made was that poorly thought out oil price war with Russia, which stimulated Russia's internal development. And it actually caused more damage to Europe, South America, and even Canada's oil industries than it did to Russia. Apparently, Donald Trump wrote an op-ed for USA Today, and he was railing against the Democrats' Medicare for All bill, Senate 1804, to establish a government-run single-payer health care system that eliminates all private and employer-based health care plans and will cost an astonishing $32 trillion with a T during its first 10 years. Now, I think we all agree that a single-payer system would work better for the American people. One of the things that has to be done is the out-of-control prices for medical care have to be addressed, because costs for medical treatment in this country have just gone right through the roof, because it's a big money-making opportunity. They got you in the hospital, you're scared you're going to die, you'll sign anything. And the average cancer patient will go through their entire life savings in less than 2 years. That's how bad it is. My concern is the fact that the government is going to run this, because they've done such a terrible job of everything else. Remember, Obamacare was supposed to be government-run health care. Look what a disaster it was. So I'm in agreement that we need a single-payer health care system. I just think it should be private. I think it should be limited in how much money they can make in terms of profit. Remember, prior to Richard Nixon, there was actually a law in this country that you could not make a huge profit on health care. You would charge the patient to recover the cost of your supplies and pay your staff, and you could make a small amount for future investment in facilities, but there were strict limits on it. And then Nixon signed the Health Maintenance Organization bill as a favor to his friends over at Kaiser Permanente, and healthcare went from being about healthcare to being another get-rich-quick scheme racket. The part that really worries me, of course, is that this Democrats' Medicare for All bill, $32 trillion, where do they think the money is going to come from? It strikes me as very unrealistic. The other part of the problem I don't like is that the Democrats are probably going to want to put all the illegal immigrants and refugees on this plan. Okay, out in California, the big cities are starting to face serious public health issues caused by the rise in homelessness. And Joel Kotkin came out with an observation. California is actually becoming a feudal state with ultra-rich individuals lording over a rapidly declining middle class. And yeah, the wealth inequality in this country is completely out of control. We're seeing all these billionaires who became billionaires because they were able to bribe lawmakers to take the controls off, to deregulate the financial industry. And they became insanely rich, and they're buying more and more corrupt politicians. It's a self-feeding cycle. And you can't have this much wealth inequality without eventually something bad happening. Look at France prior to the French Revolution, how bad the inequality was there. And I'm not advocating revolution. I'm just saying the potential for one cannot be ignored. All right, we're going to take a phone call here from Frank in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Michael, yeah, thank you for taking my call. And you were talking about the single-payer plan,
yes,
the Medicaid for all. So, of course, I had done my research on it, and I can honestly tell you that plan was wrote by Wall Street. The big boys wrote that plan because when you look at the way it's being financed, they're not going through import taxes and tariffs to finance this Medicaid for all. What they're going towards is the people that can least afford to pay for it. For an example, they want to tax unearned income. Now, that's income that from injured workers or veterans or disabled people or people that were in auto accidents collecting on their claims. They want to tax that income as taxable income. Next, what they want to do is remove a progressive income tax up. Now, that's not going to affect Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or the wealthy people that keep all their money in, these nonprofits, and they only pay like 15% tax on their money. That's going to hurt the people like the lawyers and, the ones that went to school, the doctors, the pharmacists. Yes. That's where they're going to tax the people at. The whole system was wrote, and Trump is correct. I mean, by Wall Street and by big business, because big business does not want to take on the burden of having its medical expense cut into its profits. So they want to dump the people on Uncle Sam's payroll and have the people least that can afford to pay for it, Michael.
Yeah. Well, I do agree with Trump that this is a bad idea, mostly because $35 trillion, there's nowhere to get that money. It's clearly unworkable from the start. And I'm very concerned, of course, about anything that is being run by the government, because the government can't seem to get its act together on pretty much anything these days.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. Look at the VA. Now, the VA has gotten better under Trump. I can honestly tell you that. I mean, they're really good with their appointments now, and they kind of take a concern. They actually give you a follow-up call. That had never happened to me in years, as far as I can remember. So it is getting better, but you're right. Government will get a control of it, but it won't be controlled by government. It will be controlled by big business behind government that would be putting all these mandates and making sure who's going to pay for the Medicaid for all. Well, we know that big business ain't going to pay for it with their profits or import taxes or tariffs. They're going to pay for it with the littlest people that can least afford to pay for it. And most of these people already got health insurance. It's just a really bad idea. It's a bad plan. Trump is correct. I mean, I don't agree on a lot of things with Trump. Sometimes he gets too bombastic, but he's right. This Medicaid for all, it's really going to hurt the people that are just way down. I mean, the lowest of the run on our society are going to be paying for these type of programs, and it's not going to do them any good in the long run because they'll be all screwed up again. I guarantee there'll never be a cure for anything. Be more treatments and stuff.
Yes.
And not a good plan. So we got to vote this down, Mike. We got to get a hold of our Congress people and say no way, this Medicaid for all. And another thing too, by the way, I'll be real quick, is that they didn't put in citizenship. Another thing, it's like Medicaid for the entire world, because when I read the top of the right of the bill, it says, that they will define who's allowed to get it, but it didn't say for U.S. citizens or legal residents. It basically said for everybody. That means that if you're an illegal crossing the border, you go to your nearest, navigator, I guess, you can sign on for the best health care in the world. This is where big businesses, and then again, because we know pharmaceuticals know the more people that got signed up, regardless if they're legally here or illegally here, it's going to make them big profits. So we can see that it's a really bad bill. It's a bill that really wasn't done by a citizens group like guys like me and you and your wife sitting on a panel saying, okay, this is what we need. This is all done by big business behind closed doors, soft pedaling to the DNC as something really good. But when you get to read the details, the devil is in the details of that HR 676. So. Read the bill close, and it's bad policy, Mike. And thank you so much for taking my call and giving me some time to vent on this.
Well, you have reason to vent, because we remember when we saw with Obamacare the same thing. The Affordable Care Act was written by the health insurance industry to basically force premiums up, deductibles up, to increase their profits. And it turned out to be a disaster for a lot of people. And this is just more of the same. And it's coming from the same party, the Democrats.
How bad, you're so right. You know how bad of a disaster it was? My friends got let go from their policies, and they had damn good policies, health insurance, and they got re-put back on for $4,000 more. You can get the same policy, but it's going to cost you about $4,000 more a year. This is how bad it was. It was bad legislation. Obama was too naive to understand, or either he was declining it or complacent, but you're right. It hurt the little people. It hurt the people that can at least afford to pay for it when they were dropping people off their policies and saying, yeah, we can get you back on, Athena Life or whatever health agency, but it's going to cost you more money, for the same policy, by the way. And that was what the Obama, the ACA done. It really hurt the people. So this Medicaid for all is going to be even worse. It's going to be 10 times worse than Obamacare, because it's going to tax the hell out of the people that can at least afford to pay for it. And it's going to be run by big business, and they're going to start calling the shots behind the scenes. And the DNC is being used. They're being used by corporate America to soft pedal this bill. It's going to hurt the people when it gets passed. If it gets passed, I say call Congress. First, read the bill, folks out there. Read the bill, and then think big business behind every single word that they put in that bill. It wasn't wrote by common folks. It was wrote by the big, wealthy business industry that runs this country. And they're going to get a big windfall when they get rid of their employees and put them on a national health care.
And I'm sure that the Democrats, who are behind this, their stock portfolios are loaded up with all kinds of health stocks here. And by the way, I want to correct you on one point. We do not have the finest health care in the world in this country. It currently ranks like 33rd or 34th, despite all the money. Okay. It's like the military-industrial complex, most expensive in the world, and it's junk.
You're right. You're right, Michael. I'm sorry. I should say, correct me, the most expensive health care in the world. For what we pay for, we should find cures. You're right. You're absolutely right. We are going in the wrong direction with health care. It should be an industry based on cures, but they don't want it based on cures. We know that.
Cures are a bad business model.
For cancer patients. Yeah. And you think about how far we came when we were kids back in the 50s, and they had these wonder drugs coming out, and we were on the verge of curing all these diseases, and all of a sudden, it's all been gone back in the 60s.
It's all driven by profit motive now. That's it. And I think the reason that we had those laws limiting the amount of profit that could be made from healthcare was to keep the focus on the healthcare. But today, it's just all pushing product. Anyway, listen, Frank, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for station, actually commercials. We got 2 more callers waiting on the line. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we go back to the phones here, just real quick, Associated Press is now reporting a comment from Donald Trump saying that Saudi Arabia being blamed for the missing journalist is another case of guilty until proven innocent, an obvious reference to the whole Kavanaugh circus. That certainly wasn't the case with the Skripal situation, was it? And let's be very honest, this missing journalist did walk into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, and he never came out, at least not under his own power. So I think there's a little evidence there that says Saudi Arabia is involved to some extent. All right, let's go to the phones here. Robert from Sausalito, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Mike. How you doing?
Doing fine.
Oh, good. Your last caller was talking about a little bit about the healthcare rights, and I totally agree with him. But I wanted to talk about gun rights for a minute.
Okay.
Do you have a minute?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I live in California, and if you've come to any understanding of the gun rights, as they so call it, out here in California, we're looking at hard times.
Yes.
And I was, when it comes to the idea of me being able to have a handgun or a long gun in my own home for the sake of my own protection, we're starting to get to the crux here in California. And, I mean, they're talking about trying to outlaw our capability of defending our homes. And I was wondering what you had to think about that.
Well, we've talked about this on the show many times here, and obviously the Second Amendment it does extend to the idea that you should have the means to protect your home. And I'm one of the people who has driven a criminal out of my home with a firearm. It happened many years ago when I was living in California, and I'm very grateful I didn't have to actually pull the trigger. But you should have that right.
Yeah,
I mean, if you look at the if you look at the response time for 911 calls, it's averaging 10 to 20 minutes for an emergency police call. What are you going to tell the rapist or the mugger or the murderer? Can you wait 20 minutes? The cops are going to be right here. There have been some cases where people are saying it has taken 4 hours to get a 911 call.
Second.
Okay.
You're absolutely right. But what really comes to mind in my presence of being is, what do you do when you have a loaded firearm in your home and the cops decide that they want to come and, I don't know, molest your presence? I don't know how else to put it. When they want to come into your home, despite the fact that they may or may not have any legality to do so, and when they decide to just go ahead and toss everything about, and if they find your firearms, what do you do then?
Well, you're talking about police who are engaged in unlawful activity, and there was actually a Supreme Court case, John Bad Elk versus the United States, and the Supreme Court ruled in that case that when police officers are in compliance with the law, they are owed our obedience, respect. But if they're acting outside the letter of the law, then they're just ordinary citizens. And that in point of fact, citizens have a right to defend themselves against such abuse, up to and including the use of lethal force. Now, obviously, shooting a cop would be a very, very serious...
Case name again?
John Bad Elk.
Can you give me that case name again? Bad Elk.
John Bad Elk.
Bad Elk. Okay. I'll look this up. I appreciate this. Thank you.
Okay.
This is why I call in.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. John Bad Elk.
Well, it's 3 words. John Bad Elk. You know, like the critter with the antlers on the head. And again, the Supreme Court said that when the police are acting outside the letter of the law and they are a threat to you, that you have a right to resist them, up to and including the use of lethal force. Now, whether that Supreme Court precedent would still be considered valid today is open to debate. We know under this liberal establishment, they think all guns are bad and that we should be totally dependent on the police for our safety, even at a time when the police are plundering the American people through civil forfeiture and are engaged themselves in a campaign of unrestricted violence against the American people. So it is a very, very difficult situation to be in. When I lived there, I loved California, but Claire and I have talked about it many times. When we talk about finding some way to get back to the mainland, we would never, ever live in California ever again. We're not even sure we would visit there, especially after how we were treated the last time we tried to go to Disneyland. Just standing in line, waiting to get groped and fondled. And I turned to Claire and I said, this is not the happiest place on earth anymore. And we just turned around and left. We never bought the ticket. We never went inside. Anyway, listen, Robert, we're going to let you go. We have another caller waiting on the line that we will get to after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the telephones. Rick in Arizona. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Pricing in the healthcare industry is kind of on my mind.
Yeah.
In 2013, in Nevada, I had a CAT scan, and it was $250. And that was with what you call contrast. That's where they can see the whole abdomen. You can get them with or without contrast. With contrast is more expensive. I had one last summer in a town back in the Midwest, and it was $3,000.
Well, it depends on, what your insurance coverage is and if you're in or out of your zone. It's one of the...
No, there was no insurance.
No insurance, and you got a CAT scan for $250. That's rather amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, Claire just had an MRI. Claire just had an MRI for her back, and even with Medicare and the supplemental, it still cost us a couple of $100.
Yeah, okay. So, anyways, if each state, you can petition laws into the legislature, and one start you could get on with is to get rid of the secret society pricing, to where these hospitals and the healthcare industry has to post what they charge for all charges on the internet. Everybody else does. I mean, you can go to an auto parts store, you can see what the price is. You can't do that in the healthcare industry. So you could get enough signatures by standing outside of libraries in states to petition to get a bill on the legislator's docket to post all their charges. That would be a start.
I think it's a great idea.
You can see the emergency room charge. You can see the quick care charge, and it's really just because American people have been disarmed from doing anything, and you can start something like that. You can do that. So if it's just they just charge what the market will bear. So if we can get out there and people would go out there and try that and get the bill to get rid of the secret society pricing, it would induce some competition. So.
Yeah, that would be a really good thing, and that would be an absolutely wonderful thing. Yeah. That's a good idea, and not just the hospitals and the doctors and everything, but I think it's time for pharmacies to have all of their
everything,
their drug prices on websites, so people can start shopping around. And I've noticed there's a new website out there where you will go and type in what prescription you need and where you live, and it'll give you the prices from the pharmacies in your immediate area, so you can get the lowest cost one. Claire and I, when we get her prescription medication, we've gotten some of it up at Walmart, and what a shock in terms of the price difference versus Long's. It's much, much less expensive at Walmart.
Yeah, Walmart's your best deal. Okay, well, thanks for taking my call.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, and we just got done talking about the economy. So let's talk about immigration and the refugee crisis. There's an article over at thefederalist.com saying about how immigration has been this incredibly hot topic, and nobody has an agreed upon policy solution. And right now we're looking at two polarized positions. The left obviously favors an open borders policy where the free flow of migrants across our borders is welcomed. Amnesty is granted to those who cross the border. And the second option would seal the border, perhaps with a wall, and find and hunt down all illegal immigrants and deport them. I'm obviously on that second one, and so is Donald Trump. And he's trying to force this argument about immigration. But we can argue all we want. The problem is there are existing laws regarding immigration, and they are simply being ignored. The Democratic Party especially, they've gone outlaw. They're doing things that are actually forbidden under U.S. law. They've gone outlaw. Bring in the immigrants. Yes, register them to vote. And it's not turning out to be a wonderful deal for the immigrants themselves. They don't realize they're being used for the midterm elections. And after the midterms are over, they're going to be abandoned. They were lured up here with promises of work and free stuff, and it's going to be wonderful. No, they're going to be dropped like a hot potato. And all of the problems associated with illegal immigrants are making the legal immigrants look bad, because it's not like you can walk down the street and just sort of psychically know this one is legal and this one is not. And the legal immigrants are actually opposed to the open borders policy for that very reason. They don't like getting grouped together with the illegals. Okay, a couple of days ago it was announced that there was 1,000 migrants that are marching from Honduras to the United States, and they crossed into Guatemala yesterday on their walk northward. It's now swelled to 3,000. Now, it's kind of hard to count because they're kind of spread out along the roads. In fact, they're clogging roads near the borders, waving the Honduran flag. What's going to happen when they get here? I'm sure the Democrats are saying, quick, get here. The midterms, are coming up. You've got to get that registration deadline. Over in Italy, Salvini has basically gone on to scold French President Emmanuel Macron because apparently French police were spotted dropping off migrants in an Italian forest along the country's shared border. So Macron is out there saying, open borders are good. The refugees are welcome here, even though it's led to terror attacks inside France. And now the police are being caught just shoving them across the border back into Italy here. Story out of Investment Watch blog, Denmark and Italy are fighting back against open borders as populism swells across Europe. We are literally seeing this schism open up between ordinary people in Europe and the United States who have had it with all of this open borders, refugees, illegal immigrants, corruption, and our governments who still seem pretty much co-opted by George Soros and his Open Societies Foundation. And it is creating this schism where people in Europe and people in the United States are definitely getting the message. The government isn't listening to us anymore. They don't have to. They get the money from the billionaires. The elections are rigged. I'm sure that members of Congress are in the back room saying, free at last, thank God Almighty we are free at last. Don't have to listen to those voters anymore. Who cares what they think? Apparently, the little kerfuffle regarding Gibraltar and Spain has now been solved. This is relative to Brexit, and they're saying that a Brexit deal for Gibraltar is almost complete. Now they got to go up to Ireland because there's an Irish border issue. So apparently Theresa May is left with 48 hours to save Brexit. And again, Theresa May and the Remainers in the British government are ignoring the will of the voters. Okay, TSA, the Tourism Suppression Agency, or at least that's what they're called around here, is now saying that there will be biometrics for all commercial aviation travelers, and eventually it will spread from planes to trains to events and to conferences. And the TSA is basically saying that if you don't want your biometric data collected, the only solution is to refrain from traveling. That's basically the attitude. You're going to do it our way. And the issue I have with biometrics is it's not a reliable technology. They're claiming it's 85% reliable. Well, what happens to that 15% who get false positives as a terrorist or something? This is going to cause huge amounts of disruption. And by the way, getting on back to Christine Ford and all those supporters who said, just believe them, just believe them. Well, let's apply that to the TSA's female victims who are saying that they are being constantly touched in a very inappropriate manner by TSA. Now, Congress gives TSA almost $8 billion a year, and there are no constraints on how TSA's 43,000 screeners treat American travelers. And we've seen photos of the abuses. A Justice Department lawyer said last year, there's actually no law establishing a specific degree of permissible intrusiveness of a TSA security screening pat-down. Although I understand that if a woman is wearing a hijab, they don't get all that intrusive with them at all. There's a special circumstance there or something. But there are American women, citizens, and even some men who are saying the pat-downs do go into private areas. If Kavanaugh had actually groped somebody the way TSA does, he wouldn't be a Supreme Court judge. Now, getting into the realm of political correctness here, we talked the other day about how this survey was given to some fifth graders, asking them for their sexual history, their gender identity, got the parents really angry because it's completely age inappropriate to be asking those kinds of questions here. So another story over here from Great Britain, where kindergarten-age children were forced to write love letters between an imaginary same-sex couple to promote tolerance and diversity. This happened at Busey Lodge Primary School in Warrington, England. And they made a video and they released it, and they were quite proud of it. And the teachers are out there saying, you know, we're teaching this class of 6-year-olds about gay marriage. Whatever happened to teaching kids science, math, and engineering? And I wonder where the parents are about this. Now, I'm all for being accepting and tolerant and understanding, but in a way, these politically correct teachers are stealing these children's innocence. They're forcing them to think about things they're not really old enough to be thinking about. When you're talking about being in kindergarten or fifth grade, you should be out there playing sports and having fun and not having to deal with that stuff until you approach that age where puberty is going to set in. And then you sit down with your parents and you get a discussion. But this overuse of schools to brainwash kids has really gone, I think, too far. Now, there's still a little bit of fallout over this situation with the World Cycling Championships, where this transgender man basically stole the medals away from American cyclist Jennifer Wagner and Dutch cyclist Caroline Van, who would have taken the silver and did that. And here is where it gets interesting. Apparently, as part of Rachel's transition, there was no effort to suppress testosterone to compete in women's sports. And apparently, there is no requirement to. And Rachel basically came out and said, this is not about performance, this is about rights. And anybody who says that I don't have a right to compete against women with my full testosterone, well, you're a racist, you're a bigot, and you have no concept of human rights. This is just getting plain silly. This is just silly. And apparently in an interview in USA Today, McKinnon basically railed against the possibility of any requirement that would force men to suppress their testosterone in order to compete in women's events. And he's talking about fairness and human rights. What about the fairness to all those women who got knocked down one space in the results? Because a man just walked on in and said, I identify as a woman, and just won the thing. I think it's stupid. I think it's self-centered. I think it shows just how badly off the rails liberalism has come. And apparently, there's a paper that has come on out, Hidden Tribes, a Study of America's Polarized Landscape. And it found, after a study, that nearly all Americans now hate political correctness. The only people who still think political correctness is great are rich white liberals who are still trying to force it down everybody's throat. But these academics, Stephen Hawking's, not that Stephen Hawking's, a different one, Daniel Yudkin, Miriam Juan Torres, and Tim Dixon said, despite what you see on social media and on the cable news channels, most Americans don't fit into what is viewed as the typical left-right category, and found that most Americans share much more common ideals than you would think from social media. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Daniel in British Columbia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael, I just want to clarify something. I think you had a misunderstanding with one of your previous callers regarding Pamela Geller. He was sort of saying like everything Pamela Geller says is BS, and I think he thought the opposite.
I'm pretty, I'm going to go back and check the recording on that, but I mean, that wasn't the only thing I had a problem with him saying. So I decided to kind of, get back to the news.
Okay, yeah, no, I'll let you get back to the news. I just thought maybe you had a misunderstanding. He was saying like he's very anti-Pamela Geller, so that's what I thought I heard.
Maybe he needs to formulate his words a little more clearly. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And I might as well put a word into it now. When you do call in, sort of think ahead of time what you want to say and how you're going to say it, so that we're not listening to just thrashing around trying to put an idea together. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program today after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. And now it's time, of course, for human-caused global warming. And as you know, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has issued their latest fear-mongering report saying we only have 12 years to fix the planet, to stop human-caused global warming, that by 2030 it'll be too late. And the planet will just be broiling, and it'll be your fault because you didn't give us all the trillions of dollars that we need to fix this situation. Meanwhile, back in the real world, natural gas futures are soaring. Supplies are below average levels, and a cold snap is about to sweep across the U.S. And the stock market reacted. And fears are now growing that the U.S. is starting off this winter with a big hole in the supply of natural gas. Well, we don't need natural gas. We've got global warming. There isn't going to be any snow out there. Actually, there is. Snow fell today at the Kansas City International Airport. Now, it wasn't a lot of snow, but it still set a record. It broke a record set 120 years ago as the earliest measurable snowfall for the season. So the Old Farmer's Almanac was right again, and Al Gore's people were wrong again. This winter is hitting us very, very early. And apparently there was even a brief snowfall in North Texas. So it's definitely getting there. Over in Europe, they're having a very, very rough time of it. France and Portugal and Mallorca have been hit by these devastating thunderstorms, heavy rain, and flash flooding. And apparently they had these severe weather systems. It wasn't a hurricane, but it almost did as much damage. Apparently several people are dead. Speaking of hurricane, Florida is saying there's still no cell phone service, no gas, no end to misery in the hurricane zone. The current known death toll for Hurricane Michael now stands at 29. The World Health Organization is now holding an emergency meeting for the Ebola outbreak in Congo. And apparently 33 new cases popped up last week. And the situation, they're trying to figure out how to contain the outbreak. And the problem is because it is a conflict zone, people are moving around a lot. They can't be tracked. The epidemiologists have got nothing to work with. And there's now a risk of this virus spreading from Northeastern Democratic Republic of Congo into Uganda and Rwanda. Now, of the 33 people confirmed with the Ebola virus, 24 of them died. So this is one of the more virulent strains. So this is very, very serious stuff, and we need to keep an eye on this. If this were to get to like a major international airport, it would be global in 24 hours. Okay, apparently the Pope has accepted the resignation of the American cardinal involved in the sex abuse scandal. This is Cardinal Donald Worth, and apparently they're starting to actually publish the names of the clergy who engaged in this behavior. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots and lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody. Talk up the fact that corporate social media, Google, Twitter, Facebook, they're all filtering the discussion to help the liberals in the coming elections. And just keep spreading the word by email, by word of mouth. Please donate. We'll see you tomorrow. Aloha, America.